Captain Cole Sanders had seen more than any man should. For years, he had been the tip of humanity's spear, fighting in the war against the Xarth, a fierce alien species that showed no mercy. The Xarth had come to Earth years ago, bringing with them fire and destruction. They were relentless, cruel, and almost unstoppable. But Cole had never flinched. He had fought for Earth, for his crew, and for the future of humanity. Now, after countless battles, it seemed as if the war was finally over. The Xarth had been pushed back, their empire shattered, their queen dead. The final blow had come from Cole himself. He had led the charge that destroyed the Xarth's flagship, the heart of their military. It was a decisive victory, one that many believed would end the war for good. Sitting in the cockpit of his command ship, Cole gazed out at the vast expanse of space. The stars shone bright and calm, as if reflecting the peace he longed for. For years, the war had consumed his life, leaving him with little more than the cold memory of lost comrades and battles fought. Now it was over. He had done his part. The galaxy was finally at peace, and the crew on board were ready to return home. He could feel the weight of his mission lifting off his shoulders. He allowed himself a small smile. Peace had come at a heavy cost, but it was here. He had survived. He had done his job. "Captain," came the voice of his communications officer, a young woman named Lana. "We've received an unexpected transmission. It's coming from deep in Xarth space." Cole's brow furrowed in confusion. What? Xarth space? After everything, there's no way any of their ships are still functioning. "That's what we thought too, sir. But it's coming from an uncharted zone near their homeworld. We've been trying to trace it, but it's weak, just a whisper." Cole leaned forward in his seat, his hands gripping the armrests. Something felt wrong. The war had been brutal, and the Xarth queen who had orchestrated so much of the destruction had been killed. He should have felt relief, but instead, a nagging unease settled in his chest. Was it really over? "Put it on the screen," Cole ordered. The faint crackling of static filled the room, followed by a voice, soft, almost too faint to hear. "Stay." The word was clear. His heart skipped a beat. "Lana, did you hear that?" Cole's voice trembled with disbelief. "Yes, Captain, it's the same word over and over. Stay." It's coming from a location near the Xarth homeworld. Cole leaned back, his mind racing. There was no way. The Xarth queen had died. He had seen the explosion that obliterated her ship. She couldn't still be alive, yet there was no mistaking it. The transmission was real. "Any idea who it is?" Lana asked, her voice trembling with curiosity. "I don't know," Cole whispered, "but I need to find out." He looked out at the stars once more. Peace was supposed to feel like a weight lifted from his shoulders. But now it felt like something was pulling him back into the storm. The last thing he wanted was to venture back into the heart of Xarth space, not after everything they had been through. But the voice, soft, urgent, was too compelling to ignore. He stood up and turned to his crew. "Prepare for course change. We're going back into Xarth space." Lana stared at him in disbelief. "Sir, you can't be serious after all we've been through." "I know," Cole said, his voice firm. "But I need answers. We all do. Something's not right." His crew exchanged uneasy glances, but they knew better than to argue. Cole had led them through every battle, and his decisions, though sometimes difficult, had always kept them alive. They trusted him. As the ship adjusted its course, Cole sat back in his chair, staring at the communication screen. His mind was full of questions. Why had the Queen, or whoever it was, called him back? What did they want from him now? The silence of space was heavy. All around him, the crew moved in quiet anticipation, unsure of what would come next. Cole couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end. Not yet. He had thought his job was done. He had fought. He had led. He had brought peace. But now there was a new mission, one that called him back into the heart of the Xarth Empire, to a place where no human should go. "Stay." The word echoed in his mind, over and over again, as if calling him, urging him towards something he couldn't yet understand. Something beyond the battlefields, beyond the war, beyond the peace they had all fought for. And so, Captain Cole Sanders, the man who had led humanity through the darkest days, prepared to face whatever came next. His journey wasn't over. It was only just beginning. Captain Cole Sanders couldn't shake the strange feeling that had settled over him. As his ship, the Resolve, began its journey back toward Xarth space, the quiet hum of the engines did little to ease the growing tension in his chest. It was supposed to be a victory lap. The war was over. The Queen was dead. But now, this mysterious transmission, it felt like a weight hanging over him, pulling him towards something he wasn't sure he wanted to face. He paced the command deck, his boots making soft echoes against the steel floor. His crew, usually a lively and talkative bunch, had fallen silent. Even Lana, the communications officer who had always been quick with a joke, was now focused entirely on the monitor in front of her. "Captain," Lana's voice broke through the silence, calm but steady. "The signal's getting stronger. We're getting closer to its origin point." Cole stopped in his tracks and turned to face her. "How strong is it?" Still just a whisper. "No," she replied, eyes wide with disbelief. "It's clearer. I can almost make out words now." Cole's heart skipped a beat. Every part of him screamed that this was wrong, that they shouldn't be doing this. They had won. The war was over. What could possibly be left in that cursed place? What was calling him back? He stared at the view screen ahead. The stars outside were bright, but something about them seemed distant now, as if they were far away from everything that mattered. His thoughts were interrupted by the soft voice again, the one that had been haunting him since it first reached them. "Stay." The word echoed once more in the quiet of the command room, chilling him to the bone. There was no mistaking it, the Zizarth Queen's voice. But how could it be? She was dead. He had seen her ship explode. He had watched as the last of her fleet disintegrated into space debris. And yet here it was again, the voice, pleading, soft but undeniably familiar. "Stay." Lana turned to him, eyes filled with questions. "Captain, what should we do?" Cole stood still for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the screen as the words of the transmission echoed in his mind. He had thought he was done. He had thought the war was over, that peace was finally within reach. But this was something else. "I don't know," he muttered, "but we need to find out." The crew watched him, unsure but trusting. Cole had been their leader through thick and thin, always guiding them with steady hands. They knew that wherever he led them, they would follow, but this felt different. The ship moved deeper into the empty void of Zizarth space. As they passed through the ruins of the once mighty Zizarth fleet, the massive hulks of destroyed ships seemed like ghosts drifting in space, silent reminders of the terrible war they had all fought. The eerie emptiness made Cole feel more unsettled than ever before. This had been their enemy's territory, and it still held a kind of dark power over him. Hours passed, and the voice continued to haunt them, growing clearer with each passing minute. They were nearing the source now, and the tension aboard the Resolve was palpable. No one spoke, but their eyes darted nervously from one another, all wondering the same thing. Why had the Queen called for Cole? What did she want? "Captain," Lana's voice was urgent now. "We've pinpointed the location. It's an abandoned Zizarth station, right on the edge of the homeworld's orbit." Cole nodded, but his mind was a storm of confusion. An abandoned station? What could be left there? Why had the Queen, the very embodiment of the Zizarth Empire, chosen to contact him from this lonely place? As they neared the station, Cole could see its dark shape against the stars. It was massive, an enormous structure built with the sharp, alien architecture of the Zizarth. It looked like a carcass, hollow and lifeless, drifting in space. But there was something oddly compelling about it, like a forgotten tomb that whispered for him to enter. "We're entering the station's vicinity now, sir," Lana reported, her voice tight with tension. "Reading no signs of life." "Doc," Cole ordered, his voice firm despite the uncertainty gnawing at him. "Prepare for a possible contact, and get ready for anything." The docking bay doors opened with a groan, and the crew braced themselves for whatever awaited them. Cole's heart thudded in his chest as the ship's landing gear clanged against the cold, metal surface of the Zizarth station. It felt wrong, too quiet, but it was too late to turn back now. They had to know. With every step he took onto the Zizarth station, Cole felt a deeper sense of unease. The air was thick with a strange energy, the walls adorned with alien symbols that seemed to pulse faintly in the dark. His footsteps echoed hollowly as he moved forward, leading a small group of officers all on edge. They knew what the Zizarth had been capable of, what their queen had done to Earth. And yet there was something in Cole's gut that told him this wasn't about war. It wasn't about fighting anymore. The crew moved cautiously through the empty hallways, the air cold and heavy with the scent of metal and decay. The silence felt suffocating, as if the very station itself was holding its breath, waiting. Cole led them into a massive chamber at the heart of the station. In the center stood the Zizarth Queen's throne, a dark, imposing structure that seemed almost alive, pulsing with a strange energy. but the queen herself was nowhere to be seen. Just as he was about to speak, the voice came again, this time not from the comms, but from deep within the chamber itself. "Stay." The voice, more powerful than before, reverberated through his bones. Cole's breath caught in his throat as he turned toward the source. There, at the far side of the room, illuminated by a dim, flickering light, stood the queen. Her form was weak, frail, much smaller than he remembered. Her once glowing eyes now dim, and her body, covered in worn scales, was hunched in exhaustion. She looked like a shell of the terrifying leader who had waged war across the stars. But it was her, the Zizarth queen, alive, standing before him. Her gaze met Cole, and for the first time he saw something in her eyes that he hadn't expected: vulnerability. "Stay," she whispered again, her voice full of something that resembled desperation. "Please, I need you." The words hung in the air, heavy and impossible. Cole stood frozen, unsure of what to do. His mind screamed at him to leave, to walk away. But something deep within him stirred. He had fought for peace, and now the last of the Zizarth needed him. "Why?" he asked, his voice hoarse with emotion. "Why call me back? Why now?" The queen's eyes softened. "Because you're the only one who can help me." And in that moment, Cole knew that the story was far from over. Cole Sanders stood still, his mind spinning with confusion and disbelief. The Zizarth queen, the enemy he had fought for so many years, the creature responsible for untold destruction, was standing before him, her once mighty form now fragile and weak. Her eyes, though dim and clouded, still held a glimmer of something that Cole couldn't quite place. It was an emotion he hadn't expected to see from a being like her: vulnerability. "Stay," the queen whispered again, her voice barely more than a breath, but the weight of her plea filled the room. Cole's heart pounded in his chest. Every part of him screamed to turn away, to leave this cursed place. But his feet remained rooted to the cold metal floor. He had fought the Zizarth for so long, and now, here she was, standing before him, asking him to stay. The crew behind him shifted uncomfortably, their faces filled with disbelief and fear. They had followed Cole into the heart of the Zizarth Empire, unsure of what awaited them. But none of them had expected this. "Captain," Lana's voice broke through the silence, filled with uncertainty. "What should we do?" Cole glanced back at her, his thoughts a whirlwind. His mind told him to run, to get out of there before things went from bad to worse. But something in his gut told him that he couldn't just leave now. Not when there were answers to be found, not when there was a chance to understand what had led to this moment. The queen's eyes locked onto his, pleading with him in a way that made his stomach twist. "Please," she said softly, her voice weak, yet filled with an undeniable urgency. "I need your help." Cole took a hesitant step forward, his hand instinctively resting on the hilt of his blaster, even though he knew he wouldn't need it. He had fought the Zizarth in battle for years, watched their ships burn, their warriors fall. But this was different. This wasn't about war anymore. "Why should I help you?" Cole asked, his voice rough, struggling to keep the anger and confusion from seeping through. The queen's eyes flickered with something that almost resembled regret. "Because we're dying," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Our people are dying." Cole frowned. "What are you talking about? The war? Over, you're finished." The queen's broken laugh was a hollow sound. "You think it's over just because the fighting stopped? You think you destroyed us by killing me? No, Captain, you killed the leader, but you didn't kill the curse." Cole's heart clenched at her words. There was something about the way she said it that struck him deeply. The Zizarth weren't just a war machine. They weren't just the monsters they had seemed to be. They were a species lost in their own darkness, trapped in a cycle they couldn't escape. "Explain," he said, his voice quieter now as he took another cautious step forward. The queen slowly sank down to the floor, her thin, shaking hands resting on her knees. "My people were once peaceful. We lived in harmony with the universe. But over time, we grew hungry. Power took hold of us. It twisted us, turned us into something we never meant to become. The war was not just about conquest. It was about survival, a survival we were never prepared for." Cole was silent. The weight of her words settled into his chest. He had always believed the Zizarth to be merciless monsters, but now, hearing her speak so softly, so broken, made him question everything he had ever known. "You had no choice," Cole murmured, more to himself than to her. The queen nodded faintly. "No choice. We became trapped by our own hunger. The war, the destruction, it wasn't what we wanted. It was the only way we knew how to survive." She looked up at him then, her eyes filled with something that could almost be mistaken for sorrow. "And now, after all we've done, after all we've lost, there is nothing left for us. Our people are dying, not from weapons, but from the curse that has taken hold of us, a curse of endless war. We cannot stop it." Cole's mind raced. The Queen was right about one thing. The Zizarth had been a force of nature, unstoppable in their conquest. But to hear her speak of a curse, something deeper than just a desire for power, was unsettling. "Why me?" Cole asked, his voice low. "Why do you need me?" "Because," the Queen whispered, her eyes filled with deep regret. "You have what we've lost. Humanity. The will to rebuild, to start anew. You fought your wars, you lost your people, but you didn't let it consume you. You rebuilt, you learned, and we never learned." Cole's mind was spinning. He had fought against the Zizarth for so long, believing them to be nothing more than monsters. But now, standing here before the Queen, hearing her broken words, he began to see a different story. They had been just like him. They had fought. They had lost, but they hadn't learned how to heal. The Queen reached out slowly, her hand trembling as if she was afraid of his rejection. "Please help us. Teach us how to rebuild. We don't want to fight anymore. We don't know how to stop." For a moment, Cole stood there, caught between the past and the future. The Zizarth had been his enemy. He had seen his friends die because of them. But now they were begging for help, not for mercy, but for a way out of the endless cycle that had consumed them. He felt a deep, aching sadness in his chest. They were just like humanity, broken by their past, struggling to find a way forward. Slowly, he knelt down in front of her, looking into her eyes. "I don't know if I can help you," he said quietly, his voice full of doubt. "I don't know if I can teach you how to stop fighting." The Queen's gaze softened. "I don't expect miracles, Captain, but maybe you can show us that there is a way out, show us that peace is possible." Cole stood, his mind still a whirlpool of thoughts. He wasn't sure what to do. He wasn't sure he even had the right to help them. But one thing was clear, this was bigger than any war he had fought. It wasn't about enemies anymore. It wasn't about victory. It was about something far deeper. It was about healing. "All right," Cole said, his voice steady now. "I'll stay, I'll help you, but this is your chance. You have to want it." The Queen's eyes filled with something akin to gratitude, though it was tinged with sadness. "We want it, Captain. We want it more than anything." As the two of them stood there in the heart of the Zizarth Empire, Cole realized that this was the true test, the real mission. Not to fight, but to heal. And for the first time in his life, he wasn't sure how the story would end. But he knew one thing, it was no longer about war. It was about something far greater. Captain Cole Sanders stared at the broken Queen, her frail body now seated in front of him. The weight of her words still hung in the air, heavy and impossible. She had spoken of a curse, of a war that wasn't just about power but survival. But it was more than that, something deeper, something Cole couldn't yet understand. He had fought against her kind for so long, lost so much. And now here he was, kneeling in the heart of Zizarth space, questioning everything he had believed. He had thought he knew who the Zizarth were, merciless invaders, mindless conquerors. But now, standing before him, the Zizarth Queen seemed human. She wasn't the ruthless monster he had imagined. She was just a broken leader, a broken species, begging for a way out. "What do you mean by this curse?" Cole asked, his voice soft. He needed answers, and he wasn't sure he was ready to hear them. The Queen closed her eyes for a moment, as if gathering the strength to speak. "It wasn't always this way. We weren't born to conquer. We were once peaceful, living in balance with the stars. But the more we expanded, the more we desired. We reached for power, for control, and in doing so, we began to destroy what made us who we were. We turned on each other, and our hunger for dominance consumed us." Cole felt a pang of sympathy, a feeling he had never expected to feel for the Zizarth. He had heard of their history, their rise to power, their endless wars, but this was different. "The war you waged against humanity wasn't just to conquer," the Queen continued, her voice trembling. "It was to survive. We were dying, Captain. The more we fought, the more we lost, and the curse grew stronger. It's like a disease, a sickness that festers within us, driving us to destroy everything in our path. We thought we could stop it by winning, by crushing our enemies, but it only made it worse." Cole listened intently, his mind struggling to process what she was saying. He had always believed the Zizarth were a species of monsters, creatures that destroyed without reason. But now, it seemed there was more to their story. Their destruction wasn't out of malice, it was born from fear, from the desperation to survive. "So you're saying that the war, everything we've been through, wasn't because of hatred?" Cole asked, his voice thick with disbelief. The queen shook her head, her eyes filled with sorrow. No, Captain, it wasn't hatred, it was a sickness. And now we are dying. The curse is killing us from the inside. We can't stop it. It's too late. Cole felt the weight of her words. He had seen destruction. He had seen the bodies of his comrades and the ruin of cities, all caused by the Xarth. But what if there had been no other choice for them? What if, like humanity, they had been trapped by their own mistakes? "What do you want from me?" Cole asked, his voice strained. "You want me to fix this, to heal your people?" The queen's gaze met his, filled with a mixture of desperation and hope. "I don't know if you can heal us, Captain. I don't know if there's any way to undo the damage we've caused. But you, humanity, you know something we don't. You know how to rebuild, how to rise from the ashes of war. We need your help to break the curse, to stop the cycle." Cole was silent for a long moment, his mind racing. He had spent years fighting, training, losing everything he had. He had known nothing but war. And now he was being asked to help his enemy. But these weren't just aliens. They were beings just like humans, caught in a cycle of destruction they couldn't escape. He looked at the queen, at the pain in her eyes, and he felt something stir within him. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't even sympathy. It was something deeper, a sense of responsibility. He had fought for peace, but peace wasn't just the absence of war. It was something more. Peace was understanding. Peace was healing. "I don't know if I can stop this curse," Cole said quietly, "but I'll try. I'll help you." The queen's eyes softened, and for the first time a faint smile flickered across her tired face. "Thank you." For the next few days, Cole stayed with the queen, learning more about the Xarth and their people. He listened to their stories, their history, their struggles. The more he learned, the more he realized just how similar they were to humanity. The Xarth had once been a peaceful race, too. They had once looked at the stars with hope, believing that they could live in harmony with the universe. But somewhere along the way, they had lost their way. Cole spent hours in deep conversation with the queen, discussing the nature of the curse, trying to understand how it had taken hold of the Xarth. It wasn't just a physical illness. It was a mental one, a psychological scar that had been passed down through generations, feeding on the fear and desperation of their people. It had turned them into something they had never meant to become. The more he listened, the more he realized that breaking the curse wouldn't be easy. It wouldn't be about fighting or conquering. It would be about understanding. It would be about teaching the Xarth how to let go of their fear, how to rebuild what they had lost. It was a daunting task, one that seemed impossible even for someone as determined as Cole. But deep down, he knew that this was what he had been prepared for, not just to fight, but to help others find a way out of the darkness. "I will stay," Cole told the queen one evening, his voice steady and sure. "I will help you rebuild, but it will take time. It won't be easy." The queen nodded, her eyes filled with gratitude. "We are ready, Captain. We will do whatever it takes." And so the real work began. Cole began to teach the Xarth, helping them learn how to overcome their fear, how to break the cycle of destruction. It wasn't just about fixing what had been broken. It was about showing them a different way, a way of hope, a way of peace. The Xarth were willing to learn. They wanted to change, but it would take time, it would take patience, and above all, it would take trust. And in that trust, Cole found something he had never expected. He found a new purpose, not as a soldier but as a healer, not as a conqueror but as a guide. He had come to destroy the Xarth, but now he was here to help them rebuild. For the first time in his life, Cole Sanders understood what true peace meant. It wasn't just the end of war. It was the beginning of something new, something better, something worth fighting for. The days on the Xarth ship turned into weeks, and Cole Sanders found himself caught in a strange rhythm. It wasn't the hustle and bustle of war anymore. There were no battle cries, no explosions, no orders shouted across the chaos of the battlefield. Instead, there was silence, heavy, quiet, and peaceful, except for the occasional hum of the ship's engines and the soft murmur of his thoughts. Cole was still trying to wrap his head around what had happened. He had gone from fighting the Xarth, seeing them as the ultimate enemy, to being here, helping them. But in the quiet, he began to understand. The Xarth, like humanity, were just trying to survive. Their hunger for power had been their undoing had caused their curse, and now they needed to break free of it. The queen, who had once been a terrifying, distant figure, was now a broken, fragile leader. Her strength had long since faded, but in her weakness, Cole could see something human, something real. She wasn't the monster he had imagined. She was a leader lost and trying to find a way forward. She was a species trying to heal. Cole had always believed that war was the only way to stop an enemy. It was what he had been trained to believe, what his instincts told him. But here, in the heart of Zizarth space, he was learning that peace wasn't just about stopping the fighting. It was about understanding. It was about reaching out even when you didn't have all the answers. One evening, after a long day of working with the Zizarth, Cole sat alone in the command room, staring at the stars. The deep emptiness of space felt different now. The stars no longer looked cold and distant. Instead, they seemed like tiny beacons of hope, calling him to a future he had never imagined. Lana, the communications officer, stepped into the room, breaking his thoughts. "Captain," she said quietly, her eyes reflecting the same uncertainty that had marked the crew since they had entered Zizarth space. "Are you sure about this? Helping them?" Cole didn't look at her immediately. He just kept his gaze fixed on the distant stars. He had asked himself the same question every day since they arrived. He had fought for so long, lost so much. Could he really help the Zizarth, the species that had brought humanity to the brink of destruction? Finally, he turned to face her. "I don't know if I can fix everything," he said slowly, "but I know I can try, and that's something at least." Lana nodded, her face filled with concern. "But Captain, they've killed so many of us, so many of our people." "I know," Cole said, his voice heavy. "And I will never forget that, but I can't keep fighting forever. Sometimes the only way to move forward is to leave the past behind and build something better." Lana didn't respond immediately. She just stood there looking at him as if she were waiting for some answer that could give her peace. But the truth was, there was no easy answer. There was no clear path forward. But Cole knew one thing for sure: he couldn't be the man he had been before. He had to change. And he had to help others change, too. The work was grueling. The Zizarth were not easy to teach. Their culture, built on centuries of conquest and domination, didn't just disappear because they wanted peace. It took time for them to learn how to trust again, how to let go of the fear that had driven them for so long. But Cole was patient. He spoke with the Queen daily, helping her work through the painful history of her people, guiding her as she confronted the ghosts of the past. He had learned that the Zizarth weren't just brutal conquerors. They were a species shaped by their history, their fear, and their mistakes. And now they were trying to rebuild, trying to find a way forward. But even as Cole worked with them, he knew it wouldn't be easy. There were those among the Zizarth who still believed in the old ways, who saw peace as a weakness. They didn't understand what it meant to let go of the past, to move on. One evening, as the crew gathered for a meeting, one of the Zizarth leaders, a tall, imposing figure named Viak, spoke up. "You ask us to forget our history, to turn our backs on the very thing that made us strong," he said, his voice sharp. "You think we can just abandon everything we've known?" The room grew tense. Cole could feel the weight of every Zizarth and human eye on him. Viak's words cut deep, and Cole knew that the Zizarth weren't ready to forgive everything they had done, nor should they be. But they had to move forward. "I don't ask you to forget your history," Cole said calmly, his voice strong. "I ask you to learn from it. We all have a past filled with mistakes, but we can't let that past define our future. You can choose to continue fighting, or you can choose to build something better, but the choice is yours." Viak scowled, but there was a flicker of doubt in his eyes. The other Zizarth leaders exchanged uneasy glances, as if they were beginning to consider something they had never thought about before. What if peace wasn't weakness? What if it was strength? Cole didn't know if Viak would ever come around, but he knew that the only way to change the Zizarth was to show them that peace was a choice worth making. He had seen the destruction war had caused, both in humanity and in the Zizarth. They didn't need more war. They needed hope. They needed a future. Days turned into weeks, and the ship became a center of quiet activity. The Zizarth began to learn, slowly but surely, how to open themselves up to the possibility of peace. They weren't perfect. They still fought their old instincts, still struggled to trust. But they were trying. Cole spent more time with the Queen, teaching her how to guide her people toward a new vision, a new way of life. They worked together tirelessly to bring hope to the broken fragments of their empire. And in time, Cole began to see changes, subtle at first, but changes nonetheless. Some of the Zizarth began to see the wisdom in his words. They began to understand that the true strength lay not in fighting, but in building relationships, building a future, building trust. As Cole watched the first signs of change in the Zizarth, he felt a sense of hope he hadn't felt in years. Maybe, just maybe, they could rebuild. Maybe they could start again together. The path ahead was still unclear. There would be obstacles, challenges, and setbacks. But Cole knew one thing for certain. This wasn't just about war anymore. This was about healing. And healing, no matter how hard, was worth every step. The sun hung low over the horizon of the Zizarth homeworld, its faint, dim light casting long shadows across the broken city. It was a place that had once been full of power and pride. But now, after years of war and loss, it felt abandoned. The streets were empty, the buildings battered, and the air was thick with the silence of a people trying to rebuild what they had destroyed. Captain Cole Sanders stood on the balcony of the Zizarth Palace, his eyes fixed on the desolate landscape below. The echoes of the past seemed to haunt this place, lingering in the corners of every ruined structure. He had spent months here, working with the Zizarth to teach them the ways of peace. It hadn't been easy. There were moments when he wanted to give up, when the weight of the past seemed too heavy to bear. But every time he thought about leaving, about walking away from the broken pieces of their world, the thought of what they could become kept him going. "You've been standing here for hours, Captain," Lana said, her voice breaking through his thoughts. She stepped up beside him, her presence a small comfort in the emptiness of the palace. "You're thinking about them, aren't you? About the people we lost?" Cole nodded slowly. "I can't forget them. I can't just move on without thinking about all the people who died because of this war. The Zizarth didn't just destroy our cities, they destroyed themselves. But I'm here now, and I can't turn my back on them." Lana didn't say anything at first. She understood. She had been with him through every battle, every loss, every moment of doubt. They had both seen the horrors of the war, and they had both lost so much. But the question now wasn't about revenge or anger. It was about what came next, what they could build from the ruins. "You've done more than anyone could have ever expected, Captain," Lana said quietly. "You've given them a chance, not just to survive, but to live. You've shown them that there's another way, a better way." Cole turned to look at her, his face somber but resolute. "It's not enough yet, Lana. They're trying, but there's still so much fear, so much doubt. Some of them don't want to change. They don't know how to." Lana gave him a small smile. "That's what you're here for, right? To show them how, to teach them." Cole sighed, feeling the weight of her words. She was right. The Zizarth were trying. Some of them, like the Queen, were embracing the idea of peace. But others, like Viak, the once powerful Zizarth leader, still clung to the old ways. They didn't want to let go of their history, their need for control. The fear was still there, deep within them, a fear that peace was a weakness. The thought of Viak made Cole's stomach tighten. He had come so close to understanding peace, but the old warriors were stubborn. They couldn't see the future through the fog of their past. "We've come so far, but there's still so much more to do," Cole said, his voice heavy. "This isn't going to be an easy road. It might never be easy." Lana looked out over the desolate city with him, the silence of the night pressing in around them. "Maybe not, but it's the right road, and you don't have to walk it alone." The days that followed were filled with difficult conversations, late nights spent in council chambers, and tense meetings with the Zizarth leaders. Cole continued to work alongside the Queen, guiding her as she navigated the difficult task of convincing her people to embrace peace. She was doing her best, but the weight of her past, the guilt of the destruction she had caused, was still a heavy burden. "I don't know if I can ever make up for what we've done," the Queen admitted one evening, her voice thick with emotion. "We have destroyed everything we once were. I have destroyed everything." Cole sat across from her, his gaze steady and calm. "You can't undo the past. None of us can, but you can choose what comes next. That's the only thing any of us can do, and you're doing it. You're choosing to help them, to lead them toward something better." The Queen looked up at him, her tired eyes filled with doubt. "But will they follow me? Will they ever see peace the way you do?" Cole didn't have an answer for her. He didn't know if the Zizarth would ever fully embrace the idea of peace. But he knew that it wasn't about everyone agreeing at once. It was about planting the seed, giving them something to believe in, something to hope for. "They will follow you," Cole said quietly. "If you show them the way, but you have to believe in it first. You have to show them that it's worth the risk." The Queen nodded, her hands trembling slightly as she gripped the edge of the table. She had always been a leader, a warrior, someone who commanded respect through fear. Now she had to learn how to lead with compassion, with understanding. It was a painful lesson, but one that she was beginning to understand. Over the next few weeks, Cole and the Queen began to reach out to the other Zizarth leaders, those who were still reluctant to embrace peace. It was a slow process, filled with resistance and fear. But each small victory, each leader who agreed to work with them, felt like a step forward. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. And that was enough for now. One evening, as Cole walked through the quiet corridors of the palace, he found himself standing in front of a large window overlooking the Zizarth world. The city below was slowly coming to life again, the lights flickering on in the distance. For the first time in a long time, there was a sense of hope in the air. Lana joined him at the window, her eyes scanning the view with quiet thoughtfulness. "Do you think we're making a difference, Captain?" Cole didn't answer right away. He stared out at the city, thinking of all the people who had suffered because of the war. The families, the friends, the lives lost. He thought of all the years spent in conflict, fighting for something that now seemed so distant, so pointless. And yet, in the midst of all the destruction, there was a spark of something else, a chance to rebuild. "I don't know," Cole said after a long pause. "But I know that this is the only chance we have. If we don't try, then everything we've lost, everything we've fought for, it's all been for nothing." Lana looked at him, her expression softening. "You're right, Captain, this is the only chance." The sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway, and Cole turned to see the Queen approaching, her figure tall and regal, despite the weariness in her steps. She had come a long way from the cold, calculating leader who had once sought nothing but conquest. Now, she was leading her people toward something greater, a future that didn't rely on war. "Captain," the Queen said, her voice steady, "I've spoken with the other leaders. They are willing to work with us. We can begin the process of rebuilding." Cole's heart swelled with a mixture of pride and relief. It wasn't a complete victory, not yet, but it was a start. "We still have a long way to go," Cole said, his voice filled with determination. "Yes," the Queen replied, her eyes burning with the fire of a leader who had learned to fight for something other than war. "But we will walk it together." And as they stood there watching the city slowly come back to life, Cole realized that this was what true victory looked like. Not the destruction of an enemy, but the creation of a future, one built on hope, understanding, and the willingness to change. It wasn't easy, it might never be easy, but it was a road worth walking. And for the first time in years, Cole felt as though he had found the path he was meant to walk. Captain Cole Sanders stood at the edge of the Zizarth Palace balcony, looking out at the world he had helped change. The Zizarth homeworld, once a place of fear and destruction, was slowly transforming. The buildings, shattered by years of war, were being rebuilt. The streets that had once echoed with the sound of soldiers marching now hummed with quiet activity, Zizarth civilians working side by side with humans, learning how to rebuild their society. But it wasn't just the physical reconstruction that mattered. It was the healing of a broken people. Cole had watched them struggle with their past, their violent, war-driven culture, and he had watched them start to learn how to embrace peace. The scars of the past were deep, but there was a growing hope that the future could be different. The old cycle of fear and conquest was being replaced with something new, the willingness to listen, to trust, and to work together. "Captain," Lana said, stepping up beside him, she had become more than just a crewmate over the months. She had become a friend, someone who understood the weight of this mission as much as he did. "It's happening, isn't it? They're actually starting to change." Cole nodded, his eyes scanning the horizon. He had seen the shift in the Zizarth, but it was still hard to believe. The journey had been long, the obstacles many, yet here they were, on the brink of something better. "We've come a long way," he said softly, his voice filled with a mixture of pride and exhaustion. "But I don't know if they'll ever fully heal. Some wounds are too deep, but they're trying, and that's all we can ask for." Lana smiled, but her eyes were thoughtful. "Do you ever think about Earth, about what's waiting for us back home?" Cole's expression tightened for a moment. He had been so focused on helping the Zizarth that he hadn't allowed himself to think much about Earth. The people he had left behind, the world that had seen so much destruction during the war. It felt like a lifetime ago. "I think about it every day," Cole admitted, his gaze turning back to the city below. "But we can't go back until this is finished, until the Zizarth can stand on their own without the fear of repeating their past. We've seen what happens when fear takes over. I can't walk away from this now." Lana didn't press him further. She understood. They had both sacrificed so much during the war, friends, family, and even their sense of who they were. Now they were building something new, something worth fighting for. Over the next few months, the Zizarth leaders continued to work with Cole and the human crew to establish a new order. The process was slow, and there were moments of doubt, times when it seemed like the past was too strong, too powerful to overcome. But every day there was progress. The Zizarth, once so full of pride and fear, were learning humility. They were learning to work with their enemies, to trust humans as allies instead of foes. The queen had become a symbol of this change. Where once she had ruled with an iron fist, she now ruled with wisdom and compassion. Her people, though still hesitant at times, were beginning to follow her lead. Her transformation had been as painful as it had been necessary, and Cole had been by her side every step of the way. One afternoon, as the two of them walked through the palace gardens, the queen turned to Cole, her tired eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Captain," she said softly. "I never believed this would be possible. I thought our people were beyond saving, but you've shown me that it's never too late to change." Cole met her gaze, his expression serious but kind. "I didn't do this alone. Your people have done the hard work. You've made the choice to change. I just helped you see it." The queen smiled faintly, her eyes gleaming with something akin to hope. "I've never been so afraid in my life, but I'm not afraid anymore. Not of change, not of the future, and I owe that to you." Cole nodded, feeling a quiet sense of pride wash over him. He had never thought of himself as a savior, but now, standing here in this transformed palace, he realized that he had done something important. He had given the Zizarth a chance to rebuild, not just their world, but themselves. As the months turned into a year, Cole began to feel the pull of Earth. He had been so focused on the Zizarth, on helping them recover from the darkness of their past, that he had pushed aside the ache in his heart. He missed Earth. He missed his family, his friends, the simple, everyday things that had once felt so ordinary. Lana had noticed it too. "You've been quiet lately," she said one evening after a long day of discussions with the Zizarth leaders. "Are you thinking about going back?" Cole didn't answer right away. He had thought about it often. The pull of Earth was strong, but there was still so much to do here. The Zizarth were healing, but they weren't fully recovered. They needed time, and they needed the human presence to help guide them. Cole knew his place was here for now. "I'm not sure if I'm ready to leave yet," he said slowly. "Not until they're ready, not until they can stand on their own." Lana nodded, understanding. They had both given so much of themselves to this mission. Leaving now would feel like abandoning it. But it was also clear that their time here in this broken world was coming to an end. Soon, the Zizarth would no longer need them, and when that time came, they would have to go home. The final moment came sooner than expected. One day, the Zizarth leaders, led by the Queen, announced that they were ready to take full responsibility for their own future. They had learned the lessons that Cole and his crew had come to teach. They were ready to stand on their own. Cole stood before the Queen, the weight of their shared journey settling in his chest. "You've done it," he said quietly. "You found your way out of the darkness." The Queen looked at him with a quiet strength. "We still have a long way to go, Captain, but we're ready now. You've shown us the way." For the first time in a long time, Cole smiled. He had come here to fight, to destroy, to win. But he was leaving with something far greater, peace. The Zizarth, the people who had once been his enemies, were now his allies. They were rebuilding their world, their lives, and he had helped them do it. As Cole and Lana prepared to leave the Zizarth homeworld, the crew of the Resolve gathered to say their goodbyes. The ship was no longer just a vessel for war. It had become a symbol of hope, of change. Cole had done what he thought was impossible. He had given the Zizarth a second chance. He stood on the bridge of the ship one last time, looking out at the stars. The path had been long, but it had been worth it. And as the ship prepared to leave Zizarth space, Cole knew that he had found something far greater than victory. He had found a way to build a legacy, not just for humanity, but for the entire galaxy. The journey was over, but the work of peace had just begun. And for the first time in years, Cole Sanders felt like he had finally done something worth fighting for.